Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA Edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith as always, or most of the time. We're going to go over the NBA DFS slate for...
Yeah.
Is today Monday? I'm forgetting now. It's Tuesday, right?
Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday, December 3rd. Goal here is obviously to help walk you through the slate, talk about projections, matchups, ownership, all that fun stuff, and point you to the plays that we like the most, and hopefully that helps your process and helps you win. If any of this helps you out in any way, this is free content. Smash that like button. Also subscribe to the channel. Doing so helps us, and it also should help you. Subscribing gets you alerts for future videos just like this. We did a video for yesterday's football game, and we also did NBA video. We do the NBA videos every single day that we can, and we also do video slates for the showdown and main slate for NFL. All right, so let's get to it. Let's see. We're gonna go position by position here. Starting with point guard, leading the way. By the way, if you can see these projections on screen, these are Taylor's own projections, his model. So we are, getting to dive in and see who really pops a bit more using his tweaks. And if you know of any, different discrepancies or anything that stands out, Taylor, go ahead as we go. But let's go right away up top. SGA looks awesome. 62-point fantasy projection. He's projected to be kind of owned relative to the slate. I think it's an 8-game slate, right? So it's 16%. It's not egregious. I wouldn't let that deter me, especially since the matchup against the Jazz is amazing. He continues to have high usage with Chet Holmgren out. I think the return of Isaiah Hartenstein kind of lowers the ceiling on some of these guys, but probably not that big of a deal. He just looks awesome here. And I'll also mention Luka because he's 11K. Memphis is not a good matchup at all. I'm not really eager to play him, although he did have 71 fantasy points in his return from missing a couple of games. So there's that. So up top here, my personal thing is if I'm going to pay up top, it's probably going to be SGA, and I'm not really interested in Luka. Where do you stand there?
Yeah, matchup is way better for SGA. Not super expensive. He's been amazing without Chet, like you said. A little concerned about potential blowout, but these are the cup games, so we have seen teams kind of ride their starters more heavily in them. I think this is the last group phase cup game, so we'll see what happens there. I think OKC still has to win to advance and all that, so they have incentive. Matchup couldn't be better. He's expensive, but I still really like him. There should be better value on the slate than we have now. There are a bunch of questionable tags we're still waiting on, so we'll see what happens, but I prefer him greatly over Luka. Kyrie's back for this game, so not really expecting Luka to go off again necessarily against Memphis. If I'm otherwise paying up, I think Scotty Barnes is probably the next one on my radar against the Pacers. High total game for them. He's been amazing also. Stuff in the stat sheet every night. Still no Quickly, so he's effectively playing point guard. Matchup's terrific. So he and Shea are my top two options there at point guard.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is a slate where I want to have no stud, but there's so much to like in the mid-range. You already nailed one of them, Scotty Barnes. Tyrese Maxey's not far behind him, 8.3 and 8.2K. Those guys look amazing in great spots against the Pacers and Hornets, respectively. There's also Cade Cunningham at 9.7. He looks, nothing wrong with Cade Cunningham pushing 50-point fantasy projection. I would imagine Barnes, it looks like really big-time chalk at 30%. Maxey's going to be a little bit owned. So somebody like Cade could be completely overlooked.
Though, that Maxey, I thought Maxey would be more popular. Like he was mega chalk the other day at 8K flat. He's only 8,200. Same situation without Embiid. I'm surprised he's not more popular. I wouldn't be surprised if he did come in a little bit higher owned than is currently projected, but he looked like a fantastic play. So even if he's more owned than he is now, I don't think there's a problem with it.
Yeah, on a bigger slate like this, I think I'm just going to not force things that don't feel great. So it's as simple as that. Luka is a great tourney play, but he just doesn't make sense on this slate. If I'm going to spend over 10K, it's going to be SGA. If I'm going under 10K and I want to get different, I think Cade looks really interesting. But as far as just obvious plays, Scotty Barnes and Tyrese Maxey look like smash plays. You have Donovan Mitchell against the Wizards. I don't really want to play Donovan Mitchell over Scotty Barnes or Tyrese, though, I think, because they project better and they're less likely to get, that have their game blow out than his is. So All those guys are in play. I think of the top guys though at point guard, it's Scotty and Maxey for me by like a mile. We can drop down and start talking about Jordan Poole. Looks like a really, really good value at 6.9K. Going to be very, very tough to get away from him. Obviously, the game at Cleveland it's not a good spot. So you could certainly build a case to fade what is becoming a chalky Jordan Poole, but the usage and the price and the projection all look really, really good. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. Is there anybody like in that range where you would pivot to that you feel good about? Because like if you didn't want to be on Poole?
Not that range exactly. Garland for a few $100 more would be the one I guess I would point to. 7,500 on the other side of that game.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer him greatly to Mitchell, just given the discount. Matchup against the Wizards is phenomenal across the board, so Cleveland looks good here. But as far as guys that are like 7K-ish, like Poole is, at point guard specifically, really don't see many other options. So I'm kind of landing on him a lot, which is pretty uncomfortable because they're like 16-point underdogs, but
Yeah.
usage should be there. I'm a little concerned about the ownership, though. I'd prefer it if he was lower owned, of course.
Yeah, just dollar for dollar though, he looks really good. There's no doubt about it. I'm gonna be interested to see where the ownership goes. If he becomes really chalky because of the price tag and projection, I might go under, just because it is an impossible spot on the road against a really good defensive team. So the blowout risk is real.
Cleveland does play faster, at least, than they have in years past. New coach and all that, so they're not quite as oppressive a matchup as they were under their staff, but it is still a really bad spot, and there's definitely risk of the Wizards just completely faltering and getting crushed, and the starters just don't play as much as you think. So I get why Poole projects well, but if he's going to be chalky, I agree that coming in under is not a bad idea.
Yep. So a couple of guys worth noting. Kyrie is kind of interesting. I don't really want to pay 9K for Kyrie with Luka back, but he's a little bit interesting just because he's going to be completely unowned. But I'm not really going to do that. I think I just pivot off of him and go Devin Booker. I mean, you don't really need to pivot because it's not going to be owned. Devin Booker looks good on the last game of the night. Probably going
like
KD
Durant a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say I prefer Durant if I'm going to pay a premium for his Suns.
Morant.
And Beal is back, so I don't know if I really need to do that. Tyrese Halliburton always looks good.
Is what I was talking about.
What?
I was talking about Ja Morant, not Kevin Durant.
Oh, well, I don't know if I want to do Morant if he's only going to play like 29 minutes, though.
Yeah, he's still capable of giving you a ceiling in that time. So I was just saying in the 9K range, like pivoting from Mitchell, or like I don't really want Kyrie at that price, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
I think Morant, given the per minute stuff and the ownership, is still viable in a tournament game.
Yeah, okay. So like I said before, his projection, Morant's projection looks really, really good. No doubt about it. He is too cheap for the player he is and for what his projection is. But the minutes limit, like I think I'm just gonna whatever looks obvious here, I'm just gonna trust it. Like Luka's too expensive for this spot to me, and compared to the other plays that look really, really good, Morant is the minute limit is just too much for me to ignore. Kyrie Irving's price is too high for Luka being back. So to me, like that, I'm gonna let those just be easy calls and move along. Dame is probably also out of play for me just because Giannis is there and Dame's ceiling is just pretty capped when Giannis is around. I think he's an interesting tournament play, but I don't see why I need to pay up here when I have Scotty and Maxey here. And then like Scotty and Maxey look amazing compared to these other guys. And then if you do eat the Poole chalk, that's 2 or 3 guard spots locked up for guys that just look like smash values. So I don't know. I'm not really seeing the need to go too much away from those guys. All right, so there is a lot of value at point guard, though. The most obvious one is it Vasilij Micic? Micic. I never know. Okay, so he looks great with LaMelo Ball out, 4.5K. Should have a huge role. He's been doing well. He had like 30-plus fantasy points in his last game. He should get 30 to 35 minutes. The matchup with Philly is not that great, but with Embiid out, it's not as bad as it could be. So he looks like a core play to me at 4.5K. What about you?
Yeah, he's a strong play. I don't really have much to add. Starting for LaMelo, it's just an obvious spot.
Okay, so are there any other point guard punts or just like low priced values that you're digging?
Don't mind Levert, just because the Cleveland spot against Washington is so good. He's still great per minute. Under 5K, point guard, shooting guard. I don't think that's a bad value, especially assuming pretty limited ownership. He has a ceiling I think he can offer. It looks like Casey Wallace might be somewhat chalky, which is uncomfortable, but he's had a role playing upwards of 30 minutes without Caruso. I get it, but if we're playing him into ownership, I don't really want to do that. And then I think you can take a shot on Bub Carrington, but that's like a large field tournament thing only, I think.
Yeah, I like
Oh,
the
and
case.
also Brogdon is fine at sub 6K, but like so many Wizards project well for me.
Yeah.
It's a little bit alarming, but he showed in the last game he still has some ceiling.
Well, the Wizards are all cheap. I mean, like they can somehow keep that game competitive. The Wizards across the board look pretty viable. I mean, JV, Brogdon, Poole, even Koulibaly if he can hit a damn shot. I mean, like they all look okay. I think the case on Wallace call is pretty good if the ownership can stay in check. I don't want to play a chalky case on Wallace, but he is only 4.3K, 31 plus minutes in each of his last 3 games, and 29 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3. So he's actually doing things. He's like not just like hitting a bunch of shots. Like he's actually doing a lot of stuff out there. He had 9 rebounds in his last game, so that's not very likely to be repeated. But still, I mean, he's not just shooting, so that's nice to see. And like you said, they're kind of undermanned on the outside right now, so it seems like we can probably trust that role. So I don't mind him at 4.3. I would agree. I would keep an eye on the ownership for sure. Just trying to take a look and see if anybody else. TJ McConnell, 5K flat. If Nemhard remains out, I think he's okay. If Nemhard's back, I'm not super interested with the price coming up. It's just going to come down to that for me. It's just like on a bigger slate, I'm just trying to make calls that are like if what is the slate telling me, and then just listen to it, you know. All right, that's Tyus Jones. I don't mind either. 5.8K. He's playing really well, 30, 35 minutes a game. Beal being back doesn't really negatively impact him. Should only help him because he just gets a ton of assists and he's out there for a lot of the time. So I think he's okay. And if you're going to be playing OKC guys, I think Keontae George at 6.2K is an okay run back if you get there. Not a priority by any means, but I don't hate him at all. He's got a bit of a ceiling, and he plays a good amount of the game. I think that does it for point guard probably. Any there's no other like extreme punts. You were saying how there's some news that's going to trickle out. Is there any news that might open things up for an elite point guard punt?
No.
All right, let's kick it over to
There's
shooting
really
guard.
not as much news as I thought. Like it's a pretty big slate, but
right.
The only Q tags we have are like Lively, Dick, Clay Thompson, Mark Williams. Like it's not earth-shattering news unless something unexpected happens.
I don't think the Clay Thompson news is nothing because obviously Quentin Grimes and Spencer Dinwiddie, their prices have come up, but if Clay's going to remain out, I think both those guys are still in play.
Grimes would be the one, probably,
I would prefer
with
Grimes.
Marshall also out.
Yeah,
I'm
100%.
not sure about Dinwiddie just because Luka and Kyrie are already back.
No, but he still played like 33 minutes last game off the bench. So
but no Kyrie in that game. So
that's right. Okay, well, yeah. So I was already going Grimes over Kyrie or over Dinwiddie. So yeah, I would be with you there too. No Dinwiddie, but Grimes would be interesting if Clay remains out. All right, at shooting guard, one of the best plays of the slate, Brandon Miller at 8K coming in with a 46-point fantasy projection. He's shaping up as uber chalk, but I like it. I guess you could just, because he's really chalky, you could get away from it if you want, but the price and the projection look awesome. The matchup with the Sixers is fine. With Embiid out, he's just playing all the minutes he can handle. No LaMelo, so monster usage. He looks amazing. He's $1,000 cheaper than Donovan Mitchell. Projects better. So what do you think about Brandon Miller up top?
Yeah, he's a good play. Just going to be mega chalk. I don't think fading him is the worst idea. Like it's a big enough slate. There's a lot of mid-range to upper mid-range value that looks pretty good. It's going to be owned by a fraction of the field comparatively. So I get why Miller's popular without Miles Bridges and LaMelo, but I don't think he's like a stone cold must play, especially on a game with a really low total like that.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree just because the shooting guard position is so terrible. There's only 5 guys who project over 40 fantasy points. I mean, there's only 5 guys who project over 35 fantasy points. It's pretty gross. So if you want to get a high-end guy at a discount, I think Miller is the one. He's not really expensive enough for who he is right now. So I think I'm going to probably meet ownership expectation there, and I'm going to go in with Miller. I think like if you're looking at chalky Jordan Poole versus chalky Brandon Miller, I think Miller just feels better. I think the situation's a little bit more palatable. I mentioned Devin Booker. I think Devin Booker is okay. Nobody else really stands out here. It's mostly Miller or Poole up top, and then we're talking about values, which I do like a few of. But is there anybody else up top that you'd prefer over Miller, and are there any values that stand out for you?
No, there's really nothing on the high end at shooting guard. Like Donovan Mitchell, okay, but
Yeah.
not a priority at 9-1. I'm pretty much just saving here. It's a value position other than Poole for me.
Okay, and there's a lot to like when you look at the value too. There is Stephon Castle, there's Lou Dort. We mentioned Quentin Grimes at 5.3K, Kason Wallace at 4.3. What other values stand out for you here?
I'm getting a lot of Devin Vassell, and I know I have his minutes over projected right now, but his minutes should keep coming up. We saw him get up a little bit in the last game. I don't imagine they're going to keep him on this like super strict 21 to 23 limit forever. And I kind of want to be there when he does see his minutes come up. He's only 5,100. He's been awesome per minute when he's been out there. So even if you put him at like 26 minutes, I don't think that's too much to ask. I think there's a path to that if the game is close. And he's not going to be owned. I think people are going to play Castle in that range, which is fine. But you're getting far better per minute production with Vassell. Same price, same positional eligibility on the same team. Even if he comes off the bench, which I think he will, I think Vassell can outscore Castle. And I think the former is going to wind up, or the latter is going to wind up being the more popular play of the two. So I don't mind that as a pivot.
Yeah, I don't hate the logic at all. I think the only thing for me is the fact that he's already carrying some ownership. So I'd be a little bit worried about limited Devin Vassell, like actually being like 15 to 20% owned. So that would be my only concern there. Probably so, just because the minutes thing, but just something to keep in mind. All right, moving on to small forward, we go. Franz Wagner leads the way with a 54-point fantasy projection. Like always, he looks awesome. The Knicks do not defend the outside very well, so he could easily get hot and just terrorize New York in general because his usage rate is disgusting. So you could pay up over Scotty Barnes and play him, but I don't see the point in paying 1.3K more to get kind of the same guy on this slate. So again, I'm going to double down with Barnes. I love Brandon Miller there as well. RJ Barrett looks really good too at 7.9K. So Franz he's forever a good play, projects really well, just not a priority for me on this slate. I'm loving Barnes, Miller, and RJ. The only issue is those guys are going to carry ownership. I don't even mind Paul George at 7.5K. Just he's not really a priority. I definitely would prefer RJ, especially since Paul George is carrying some ownership, which is a little bit surprising. I guess it's because it's the Hornets and the price tag. So, all right. So how do you feel about Wagner, and what other small forwards up top are you interested in?
Yeah, I like Wagner if you have like an otherwise really chalky build and you're looking for a way to get different. He's not going to be owned on this slate at 9,600. And like you said, the Knicks haven't been nearly as good defensively this season, which is kind of a surprise, but it is what it is. The usage for him has been amazing. I think you can certainly play him, but the value, like you said, with Barnes, Miller, and Barrett is pretty hard to ignore. So Barnes, even at significant ownership, like you can argue he's a 9K to 10K player that we're getting for 8.3. Guard forward eligible. Much easier to play him at forward, I think. So that's probably what I'll do. I think he's pretty clearly the top guy at this position overall. Other than like Barrett's fine. I don't know yet if I would play Barnes and Barrett in the same tournament lineup. I think it's okay. But generally something like that with two high usage guys on the same team, I prefer to split them up. But they're strong plays either way. And then otherwise, I'm pretty much just paying down. Like I'm not messing a ton with the marking in Paul George mid-tier.
Yeah, I think Paul George, if his ownership wasn't where it's at, like right now it's pushing 20%. I'm not into that. If he was contrarian, and and then he could become a leverage play on Maxey, then I'd be into Paul George. But as things stand, the price and matchup are appealing, but nothing else really calls to me. I like what you're saying about the Barrett and Scotty Barnes thing. I agree. I think for maximum upside, you probably want to, not try to correlate those guys together. Now, the usage rate on Toronto's offense is obviously pretty concentrated. It's them and Pirtle, and that's kind of it. I do wonder if Grady Dick comes back. He does have a good usage rate, so Grady Dick will be pretty involved offensively if he's out there. I don't like Grady Dick for DFS because all he does is score. So I kind of need one of those dudes to be out to have interest in Dick. But his but his return could impact one of those guys. Long story short, they're only separated by $400. So it's Scotty Barnes for me all the way. He's got the better projection, and he just does more when he's on the floor in general. Historically, he's the better points per minute guy. So RJ Barrett is a good, rock solid play, a little bit too cheap for his role right now. But if I'm probably only playing one of them, and the guy I want is Barnes. Lower down we go. Nobody really projects that well. I mentioned Koulibaly at 5.6. He got an okay projection, brutal matchup, but I think he's an okay play, especially if you're going to play on the Cavs side of that game. Mikal Bridges, just crazy minutes, projects horribly, and the Magic are a bad matchup. But if you want to play Knicks guys just for the minutes, it's not the worst thing to do. Oubre against the Hornets is okay. Not really a priority, but not a bad price at all. And then, we're talking about these Spurs values that all look okay. Is Vassell small forward too? I don't see him here.
No.
Well, then never mind. And then I'd mentioned Lou Dort. He's okay too. Nothing really. Quentin Grimes at 5.3. He looks okay if Clay is out. I don't see a punt at small forward that I feel really good about. Do you?
Torian Prince would be okay, I guess. But
so again, I ask you, is there, again, sir, I ask you, is there a punt at small forward that you feel good about?
No. There's really no punt at any position on this slate that looks great. Like if we're talking about Micic being like an awesome play, it doesn't feel that great.
No, but I actually love that. I love that it's not like super obvious. I'm just saying. I hope it stays that way. So people have to really take a stance. Like, am I going to go get a stud and stretch myself too thin without any obvious values, or am I just going to go straight down the middle? Right now, ownership looks like it's going straight down the middle and being like a balanced build. Looks like
I think Kispert is okay. I don't want to play Keyshawn George again ever.
Oh fuck! No. Yeah, that was the slate where I was like, I kind of like Keyshawn George. And he got like 7 or something. He
proceeded to look like the worst player that's ever lived. Yeah, that was a fun game.
It's believable. I believe that. Famous last words, Corey Kispert looks like a good player.
I think Oubre is interesting just because no Embiid.
Yeah.
The Hornets not that imposing defensively, even though they have been better this season. Decent enough price. I think he's fine, but hard to love it.
I think just Philly in general is pretty appealing because they're all not expensive and no Embiid. So somebody's going to erupt for sure, right? And they're all going to play a bit. So I don't think he's a priority, but there's not like a ton of amazing value down there. All right, over to power forward we go. Giannis looks great. He's just really expensive. He's $12K. Road date with the Pistons looks good on paper. Nothing to be sad about there. His projection's the best of the slate. That shouldn't surprise anybody. The only knock on Giannis is the price. He had 97 fantasy points the last time he faced Detroit. That probably isn't going to repeat. Dame Lillard is obviously in the game here too. I don't think he was in the first game, right?
I think you're correct.
Yeah, so either way, I mean, he could. But probably not. And this slate, it's a bigger slate. There's a lot of really good options. So I do not think Giannis is going to be a priority for me. But it would be a lot of fun if he went and got 97 again and you got him at like 5% ownership, which is what he's projecting for right now. I would bet on the over for that, but still, he's not going to be. Huh?
It's very hard to get him. Like there's just no value, and he's $12K.
It's true.
It's quite.
But that's all the more reason to definitely do a few lineups with him in there, if you can, figure out a way to like it. But hey, you don't really need Giannis in this slate. That's just the reality of it. If we're just listening to the slate and what it's saying to us, it's that Giannis is not really necessary. Wagner is a better play technically. And then Kevin Durant looks really good at 8.6K, pushing for a 50-point fantasy projection. Nice little hammer game there against the Spurs. He is too cheap. I prefer him over Devin Booker for sure. And then, of course, you have Jalen Williams, who continues to project really well, even though Isaiah Hartenstein is coming in and eating into his work a little bit. But yeah, all these guys look great, all very playable. I would personally prefer KD of those four, though.
Yeah, I like KD quite a bit. I think 8-6 is pretty light. San Antonio has been a little bit more respectable this season on defense, but there's really not a lot to love on the high end at power forward. Like once you get past Giannis, who I'm not really getting to as it stands, I'm kind of getting cheap at this spot for the most part. I think John Collins is always also okay because he's just been feasting. With Jordan Clarkson out for whatever reason, the minutes have been there for him. He's just been on a run. Oklahoma City's
John
also
Collins is probably the best power forward play.
John
And right now
Collins.
he's not owned.
Yeah, well, they're big underdogs against OKC, but OKC is a really bad rebounding team. Even with Hartenstein, they've been pretty poor. So I don't love the Utah side just because they might completely fail systematically, and you're fucked if that happens. But good value as it stands if he gets full minutes. I think he's okay. Yeah. And then Kevin Durant, like I said, I like. Otherwise, I'm kind of paying down here.
Well, yeah, I'm with you. I like the JC call. I think Evan Mobley as a pivot is a little bit safer in terms of matchup, and if there's a blowout, he's going to be on the right side of it and probably going to benefit from it. So he looks really good at 7.8K as well. I mean, we already mentioned RJ Barrett. Play him on himself on his own without Scotty, or pair them together. He's going to have enough usage that it might not matter. Even Siakam looks really good. All these guys are projecting good. They're not very expensive. They have really good roles.
Siakam is good. Like if you play Raptors and you want to run it back with him, like true revenge game.
He's my preferred. He crushed against them last time he faced them naturally. He's my preferred pacer on this slate too, and rightfully so. He's only 7.6K. So all these dudes look great. I mean, Collins, Mobley, Siakam, Barrett, and KD are the guys I'd be targeting at power forward. Just do not see a real need for anybody else there. If you want to pivot off of KD and go play Jalen, that's okay. They're the same price basically, so nothing wrong with that. There is value here. Is it Saloon?
Yeah.
Well, hey, there's dead bodies in Charlotte, so Saloon looks pretty good at 3.8K, and I say pretty good with a grain of salt because I don't know how good he actually is, but he should start and push for 30 plus minutes, maybe.
Do you know how many of his 8 shots he made in the last game?
0.
Correct.
So that means he's going to make his next 8 shots today because that's the way it goes. So the reality is, we talked about it already. There's not a lot of very low end value. He's probably one of the better punts that we could consider at 3.8K. I don't really give a shit. I'm going to play him. And then, Alexander Sarr, the matchup with the Cavs isn't good, but they need his size. So him and JV both look good for the Wizards. We'll get to JV in a second. But Sarr, if he's going to be playing 30, 35 minutes, I don't mind rolling him out there at 5.4K. If we want to go down more and we don't want to stomach Saloon, we can look at your boy Taurean Prince that you already mentioned. He's only 4K. That is, I think, as far as like just a pivot off of what should be a very chalky Saloon, that alone will give you indigestion. I'd imagine the ownership there for sure. So you could definitely pivot off of him if you wanted to. And Taurean is one of the options. Jonathan Isaac at 4.1K. I don't really hate it. And then your boy Keyshawn George, he's also there. I don't know. There's not a lot to like down there, which is exactly why I'm advocating for Saloon.
Yeah, I'm probably playing him too. He's been so bad per minute. The minutes are there. He was like the 6th pick in the draft or something. Like he's apparently a good prospect. He just does not appear to be ready. But they're giving him minutes. He's under 4K still. I'm hesitant to play him in ownership because I assume at this point he's going to be really popular because we're starved for cheap stuff. But he's one of the better ones by default. So as of now, I'm eating it. I think Sarr, he and Joval started the last game together against Milwaukee. I would expect a similar arrangement against Cleveland, given the big front court they have. So Sarr and Joval are going to be great, I think, on this slate. Caleb Martin, one of those value Sixers, I think you can play 4,700. Not exciting, but again, we're like hurting for cheap stuff. And I think Obi Toppin is another sub 4K option to consider. Good matchup, decent roll off the bench. It's fine. Not exciting either.
Yeah. Well, hey, if it makes you feel any better, Saloon did play 30-plus minutes in 3 of his last 4 games, and before going just nuclear the way you don't want him to go nuclear, he had 27 and 32 fantasy points in his previous 2 games. So if he can bounce back and gets 30-plus minutes, he's going to smash that price tag. It doesn't take a whole lot to deliver on 3.8. All right, let's kick it over to center to wrap things up. We have Giannis obviously leading the way. We know about him already. KD is available at center too, which makes no sense. We talked about John Collins. A lot of these guys are repeats, but one that is not is going to be Wemby, coming in with a nice 58-point fantasy projection, going up against a Nurkic-less Phoenix team. So he looks really good. He's not going to be owned either. So I think if I'm going to pay up on this slate, it is going to be Wemby. I think SGA against the Jazz looks great, but there's blowout risk, and then Giannis is too expensive. So if I need a stud and I want to get different, unowned Wemby at 10.6K to close this thing out, I love that. That's my favorite way to do it. Cat coming out with a 50-point fantasy projection looks good, but a matchup with Orlando is gross, so I don't really want to prioritize him. Worth noting, he also will not be owned. So why don't you give your thoughts on those top spends at center?
Yeah, I like Wemby. I'm just getting to Shea more. He's cheaper, projects a little better for me. But yeah, the Wemby thing is obviously fine if he's going to be lower owned, which I assume he will be. Otherwise, on the high end, I'm kind of fading him. Like Cat's okay. Durant, I have more at power forward. I just think there's value at center to consider. Obviously, Joe Val is going to be maybe the chalkiest play on the slate. Elite per minute, played 30 minutes in the last game. Assuming he starts again tonight, like if there's a path of 30 minutes, he's a very obvious play, and chalky should probably just eat, even if it is center only, clogging up one of those spots. Otherwise, Sar looks pretty good. If you want to pay up, I think Allen, Hartenstein, and Pirtle are all very strong plays. Hartenstein's been feasting. Pirtle maybe loses a bit of usage with Barnes back, but good spot against Indiana. Not going to be super popular either. And then Allen is as cheap as he's been all season. The Wizards give it up to centers big time. Allen's minutes floor has been lower than some of the other Cavs regulars, but if there is a bounce back spot to target him in, this is probably it. So I think he's a pretty interesting pivot for Mobley at 6,600.
Yeah, Jared Allen looks great. I think all the Cavs are arguable. You could definitely say, oh, I want to play this Cav guy for this reason. I'd say, okay, that's fair. It's the Wizards. And if the game stays close, they all could absolutely smash. But if you're going to play one, I think it's Jared Allen. I think 6.6K is way too cheap, and he projects really, really well. And we know the Wizards let you do as you please down low. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one for sure. JV is – everything you said about JV is correct. The only issue with JV, 2 issues. He is prone to foul trouble. And this game has major blowout risk. If he's going to be crazy owned, I actually do not mind being underweight or fully fading JV because his price has come up a little bit. It just depends on what I want to do. Like if I'm trying to go get multiple studs on this slate, if I'm trying to go pay up for Giannis or something, I think then JV would become kind of necessary. He's a great play in a vacuum, no doubt about it. Good per minute guy. If he starts, they need his size for sure if the game stays close. Just don't know if I fully trust that. We know Chalk JV has gone south before. It just did like 2 or 3 days ago. So
different role back then, but yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. As things stand, I think I'm with you. The logic checks out. I think I just do think there is reason to be not super confident in it just because of things can go pretty badly pretty quickly. Did you mention Plum Dog?
Nope.
All right, so last game, Plum failed as a chalky-ish. I don't even think he was that chalky because the news came after lock, but whatever the case may be, he was looking like a good play if Nurk wasn't going to be out. Nurk did miss, but then he only played 16 minutes because the Warriors go small. That's not really a concern here against the Spurs. They're going to need his size against Wemby, so I actually love him at 4K flat. If you are worried about them going smaller and or him just not panning out and getting into foul trouble, Iguodaro off the bench at 3.8K is a fine pivot. Do either of these guys feel super safe? No, but I think Plum is the play here. And he's not really projecting for big minutes or having a big projection or anything, but Nurkic is out. So as long as he starts, I think he looks like a pretty good play at 4K. You mentioned Derek Lively.
You can try it, but it's not my favorite thing.
Yeah, you mentioned Derek Lively is questionable. If he's out, obviously Daniel Gafford would look really, really good at 5.9K. I think
Walker Kessler is a guy that always projects pretty well and no one ever wants to play for some reason.
Yeah.
Minutes have been there for him. OKC, like I said, is a horrible rebounding team. He's in theory a good play. I think Miles Turner is be owned in a similar price point, and I but I prefer Kessler if you factor in the ownership.
I always like Kessler. Yeah, he continues to be like right around 6K, projects really well. Just need that game to stay close. But yeah. So before we wrap things up, let's go with our flag plant play of the day and our overall strategy.
Well, I think I'm going more of a balanced build as of now. It's just hard to get all the way up to Giannis for me. And if I am paying up, I'm going to take the significant discount you get with Shea. I think there's a leaf blower or something right outside my window.
Somebody making a smoothie over there.
I will now mute myself permanently forever.
Yeah, that's fair. If I was going to do a flag plant, it's actually going to be to go a little bit away from the balance build, which is shaping up to be the chalky one. And I'm not playing Giannis or SGA. It's going to be Wemby, who, if the ownership stands, should not be unowned like this with this type of projection on a slate like that and only 10.6K. I love everything you said about the balance build. I do really like it. There's so much to like there. But if everybody's going to be doing that, I'm going to try to make 1 to 3 different moves to get me a little bit away from that and go get Wemby. Go get Wemby up over, Jalen Williams, or up over KD, or up over one of these guys that are like 8 to 9K. Go get him instead of those dudes, and certainly instead of SGA and Giannis. That's just what I'm doing. But everything you said checks out too. That's the way it goes. Sometimes everything we're going to say, to a certain degree anyways, is going to pan out. You just need to make a couple of pivots for it to hit. And that also factors into my overall strategy for the slate too. I do want to eat a lot of this chalk. I was just going to be that 1 or 2 moves that are going to change my lineup so I can go afford Wemby to close out the slate. All right, that is going to do it for us. Hopefully this helps you out. If it does, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss out on videos just like this. Thanks for watching and good luck.